evening, everyone. It is great to see you all here. And we're so happy that you're back. If you're returning to this event, if this is your first time or you're joining us from Facebook Live tonight, we'd like to welcome you as well. My name is Erica Azak, and along with my awesome co-host, Captain Sheldon Bungay, we're going to lead you through week 11. Hard to believe, but it's week 11 of our 12-week study of Commissioner Phil Needham's book, Christ at the Door, Biblical Keys to Our Salvationist Future.
Thank you, Erica. Before we do anything else this evening, we want to take just a moment and acknowledge that wherever we are zooming in from, the land on which we gather is not our own. Tonight, I'm zooming in from St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. And tonight I want to respectfully acknowledge the land on which I am currently situated as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk people, whose culture has now been erased forever. We also acknowledge the island of Uknumaguk as the unceded traditional territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq, and we acknowledge Labrador as the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Innu of the Tassanan, the Inuit of Nunatsiavut, and the Inuit of Nunakituvut. We recognize all First Peoples who were here before us, those who live with us now, and the 7 generations to come. As First Peoples have done since time immemorial, we strive to be responsible stewards of the land and to respect the cultures, the ceremonies, and the traditions of all who call it home. As we open our hearts and minds to the past, we commit ourselves to working in a spirit of truth and reconciliation to make a better future for all.
Over this 12-week journey, we are joined by our territorial leaders, Commissioners Tracy and Floyd Tidd, and Colonels Shelley and Edward Hill. They're waving at us now. As well as every week we have a special guest or a panelist of friends and Salvationists from around the world. You can see our guest on the screen now, but we'll introduce her a little later. And all these people, along with all of us, meet together to help us go a little deeper into the concepts discussed in Commissioner Needham's book.
We just want to remind you that tonight's session will be recorded and it will be later uploaded onto the Salvationist YouTube channel, which means please ensure that your mics remain muted until the breakout sessions. And for your best viewing experience, please set your Zoom screens to presenter view.
If you're watching tonight with us on Facebook Live and you do feel challenged to ask a question or leave a comment, we encourage you to do that. You can just leave a comment there on Facebook. And next week, consider joining us for the Zoom.
Because this is a virtual experience, there's always the risk of technical difficulties. And so if you experience any trouble this evening and you lose your connection, please just remain calm and try to rejoin the session.
And now it's time to introduce tonight's special guest, all the way from Las Vegas, Nevada. Captain Lisa Burns came to the Salvation Army as a child, and she came through a food box ministry when her mom was battling addiction. Lisa is passionate about social justice, loving those in the margin, fully being herself, and while living and sharing Jesus. She has her bachelor's degree in counseling and Christian ministries. She loves art, both making her own art and enjoying the art of others. Her and her family currently serve in Las Vegas, Nevada, and they've ministered all throughout the Western Territory. Lisa's also an author. She's an author of a book called Love to a Whore's Daughter, Life and Faith Through the Lens of Grace and Redemption. And this book is available for free e-download from newfrontierpress.org. She also wrote a guided journal called Brave, Thoughts and Acts. This is part of an empowerment program for girls in foster care, which she is a huge promoter and advocator for. Lisa is a busy, sought-after speaker and teacher, so we are so excited to have her with us this evening.
Thanks, guys. I'm really glad to be here.
Well, thank you for coming, Lisa. We want to ask you a few questions and learn a little bit about you and your ministry. And so perhaps that's where we can start. Can you just tell us a little bit about your current ministry context and the different type of efforts that you are currently engaged in?
Yeah, so life is bonkers. I think for all of us, that's pretty fair to say during COVID times. But we moved during COVID, which is challenging, but has a lot of great things attached to it. So we are currently in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is fun because I was born here. So I'm sure that the Lord will somehow bring that full circle. And my biological dad is still here, who I don't know and have no relationship with. So keep me in prayer for that. The Lord's going to do in that relationship. But we're here and we are county commanders and corps officers. We're in charge of everything that the Salvation Army gets to do for all of Southern Nevada. So Nevada is shaped kind of like a square with a little weird triangle on the bottom with a little like bite chomped out of it. And we're in charge of everything like the bottom half. And then the top like third is Reno, and then everything in between is sand. So we're in charge of the things that are between Reno and the sand. And we love it. There's a lot of great stuff that's happening here. We have a whole sheltering complex that has 500 beds that is full all the time. We have a lot of programs for veterans, which I think is really important to love and serve people who have given everything to keep the rest of us safe. We also have a really phenomenal anti-human trafficking program, which is crazy. Okay, so I used to be in Phoenix. Side story. I do this a lot. But when I was in Phoenix, I heard about this anti-trafficking program happening in my division. And I'm like, that's really phenomenal. So I started making jewelry. I'm here in my craft room. I have jewelry here, just stuff like this. And I started selling it as a fundraiser to really contribute to this program. And now I get to help run the program. So look at the Lord, right? How it all works. So there's anti-trafficking stuff we do. There's homeless prevention and intervention stuff. We have the nation's only LGBT transgender dorm, which is a really cool thing to be a part of and that side of the ministry, and continue to be an ambassador of help and support and non-discrimination all over the place. We have a corps, we're corps officers too, which is really challenging, as we know, during COVID, being a great corps officer and a good shepherd. So keep us in prayer for that. And we oversee Henderson and some other like smaller places in between. And yeah, that's Vegas in a nutshell.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
So when I imagine where you live, Captain Lisa, it's probably the absolute opposite from what I imagine my village here of 50 houses. So my question for you is, living there and leading that life you just shared a little piece of with us, how are you intentional about cultivating solitude with God in your own life?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's been challenging for all of us recently, right? I did Arrow leadership. I finished about a year ago. I think I was the last class to finish completely before COVID got in the way. And being a part of Arrow leadership transformed my entire life. I have loved the Lord since I was 14, committed fully to Him from the day I said yes to Jesus. And I love Jesus and I walked with Jesus. And obviously, you know, I kind of jokingly refer to myself as a professional Christian. I worked for Jesus. I didn't necessarily dance with Jesus. And so after doing Arrow, it connected me with the Lord in really tangible, palpable ways. And I'm so thankful that I had that experience before our world was thrown into pandemic. One of the things that really just vividly stuck out to me was when I was with my last set of folks for the last cohort, we just started talking about how can we tangibly live like we believe in Jesus? Like really, what do you do? And one of the things that we said was you should be in the Word every day. And I was not in the Word every day. If I'm being honest, I was only in the Word when I was prepping for something. I was only in the Word when I preached every other week. My husband and I alternate. And if I wasn't prepping for a sermon or a devotional or a speak or a writing assignment, I wasn't really in the Word. And so I decided that day that I wasn't going to do anything else on my phone until I was in the Word first. So I got the YouVersion Bible app, and I said, I'm going to do this because I don't know how realistic it is for me to have like my paper Bible and do that before I pick my phone up, if my alarm is going and all that. And that's changed my whole life. It's changed so much about how I walk with the Lord, just making sure I'm in scripture before I'm in anything else, before I'm in Facebook, before I start scrolling to numb out, because that's usually what we use social media for, right? And so I've started cultivating that personally within myself. And I'd say probably the past 4 or 5 months or so, I've started posting regularly on social media if folks would like to join me in a Bible study, which happens every day. And it's really great because you do a devotion, you read scripture, and then there's like a section to chat about it. And so I'm in this community of people that some people live here in Vegas and are a part of my core, some live in other places. And I really feel like that's my community, like that's my group where I can connect with Jesus, others at the same time, because that's really important. You know, I think we've talked a lot about my personal relationship with Jesus, and that's gotten like kind of unfair amount of airtime, because I think that's true. We do have a personal relationship with Jesus, but it can't just go this way, right? It has to go this way. And so we have a relationship with Jesus, but that has to manifest itself in our relationship with others in our community, so we can lean on them for support and encouragement and correction, you know, all of that too. So that's really kind of become my space for that. But it's hard here because we've only lived in Vegas during COVID. So we don't even know our people, which kind of breaks my heart, because I think like most Salvation Army officers, I signed up for this to be a pastor. And in my mind, I thought I was going to be a pastor for a small to medium-sized church for the rest of my life. And so when I'm at a place right now where I feel like I'm not pastoring effectively in person, it's challenging. It's challenging. Not impossible, but challenging.
That's great, Lisa. I think you echo the thoughts, the challenges, the hurdles that so many of us are currently facing. And I love the intentionality behind what you're saying. You know, we can all do better to be more intentional in being in the Word every day. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
My next question is based on Phil Needham's book, and he suggests that we ought to see our core as covenant communities, together supporting one another in love and service. How do you encourage us to live out this teaching and this mindset of loving one another in service in our community?
Yeah, that was one of those things as I was reading over this section of the book. This book was so good. Whoa, I thought it'd be fine. I've read Needham's stuff before, and I thought his stuff is good, but this was like so good, right? So good. And I really felt like it was giving voice to how I've been feeling for a long time. Jason earlier made a kind of a silly joke about how I posted this video a few weeks ago about we should, as the Army, maybe we should consider letting the churchy churches church and us leading into social services and what this looks like. Because we don't really church very well. And that's where we put the majority of our effort, and that's how the majority of us are really evaluated as officers. But that's just the smallest little attribute of what we do every day, right? So I've just been thinking about that a lot. And as I've been thinking and kind of chewing on that more, I think it's not so much about churching, right? Like Sunday morning churching, but what does it look like to live as a proper community of believers? What does that look like, and how do we do that? And this chapter specifically, I really loved how it talked about that from several different facets, you know, and the first thing that kind of comes to mind is that sometimes we don't engage fully in mission or in community because we're afraid to let people see us for our true selves, right? The authentic versions of who we are messy and are far from perfect. And I think in a lot of ways, we're trained to maintain an image of perfection or sinlessness, or always being, you know, top shelf, no matter what, unfazable, unshakable, no crisis of faith. That's not allowed, right? And that's not real. And if we think about what we expect from other people, We don't expect those same things, but we assume people expect it from us, right? And so that's bonkers. Yeah, I think that's a tool of the enemy that he talks about. He gets in our minds and makes us feel like if you really let people see you, they're going to see you. And then maybe they won't like Jesus as much. Maybe they won't respect you. Maybe they'll talk crap about you behind your back. Maybe, or maybe not, right? Maybe they come just expecting relationship and to be seen and to be valued and to have someone who's on their team rather than expecting someone who's perfect. So I think the first thing is we're entering into this, what it means to live missionally is just know people are going to see you for who you are. And that's okay, right? That we were created to do this together. And as the body of believers, nobody's an island, right? Nobody can do this on your own, and really nobody should. And Needham talks about that in this chapter and how, we were created in the image of God. And if we believe that's true, we have to fully take into consideration what the image of God is. And that's very broad, but you cannot have the image of God without the Trinity. And each aspect of the Trinity has a different attribute, has a different reason for being, right? Has different responsibilities. And if God, the creator of the universe, the Alpha and the Omega, has a buddy system, in what world would we think we can do it by ourselves? That's crazy, right? That's crazy. That's not real. So we need each other. We were created to be in community. And if you feel like you're failing when you're doing it on your own, that's because you're failing because you're doing it on your own. And that doesn't mean you're weak or you're getting it wrong. It just means you're not doing it with the community of believers that we are intended to. So I think that's really important. And I think knowing that this is not for wimps, right? That you're going to have struggles, that it's not just about creating this really great atmosphere of truly loving each other when it's easy. I think if it was an easy thing to do, God probably wouldn't talk about it so much. Like he knows it's hard. That's why he keeps reiterating how important it is for us to love each other, because we're going to interact with people and love people that sometimes are jerks. And I think it's okay to say that, but God's not done with any of us yet, right? And that's something that God is working in my life, is knowing that even if someone has hurt me or has wronged me or has talked bad about me, in the kingdom of Christ, I shouldn't just write them off, which in my humanness, I like to do. But I don't think that is in line with how God wants us to love each other. That's why he talks about forgiveness so much, because it's not easy. So none of this will be easy, but I know it will be worth it.
We get nothing else out of this conversation. Following Jesus is not for wimps.
Nope.
That's
no wimps allowed.
Loving people is not for wimps. So another thing that Needham shares here, so he talks about George Scott Railton and this fear that he had that the Salvation Army, the movement, would somehow move from being a lay movement as more and more expectation and control were passed on to core officers. And so in response to this, Needham writes, and this is from chapter 11, he writes, "We must be building a community of sanctified Christians who are growing in holiness and living their whole lives for the mission of Jesus. A community invested in every member and every member invested in mission." So how would you encourage us Salvationists here in Canada and Bermuda to ensure to encourage that every member is invested in the mission of Jesus?
Yeah, that really just to me sounds like the priesthood of all believers, doesn't it? That knowing the responsibility of keeping the core moving forward, whatever that looks like, right? Because it's really hard to generalize what keeping the mission and the movement going forward means, because every core has a very unique identity and kind of personality of what that core looks like. But I think we really get into trouble when we put all on the shoulders of the officer, right? First and foremost, because we are all transients. As officers, we won't be in any place forever. And I think it needs to really be rooted in the identity of the core and the people and their value system and the direction in which they want to go. Like for me, if everywhere I go, I'm gonna talk about justice hard. I'm going to talk about kids in foster care hard. I'm going to talk about anti-trafficking hard, because that's the passion of my heart. If I go, if God in his infinite wisdom sends me to a very traditional core with lots of brass banding, I don't know what I would do. I mean, I'd still talk about justice, right? But I don't think we would speak the same language in the same way. So that would be when the soldiery, when the attendants, when the adherents, realize that we all have a part to play in this, right? And that we're all in this together. And if I, as the corps officer, leave a corps and it falls apart, I've been doing it wrong. And I think for a lot of times we kind of just make it about us, right? We feel like we don't have the help, or maybe we won't accept the help, right? Maybe we aren't cultivating the help. I think there's lots of different reasons for the disconnect, but we can all say that there is a disconnect. And so I think really just leaning into the priesthood of believers and what that means, and knowing that everybody is responsible for sharing Jesus. It's not something you can choose to not do. When we were here, I don't know, maybe like 3 weeks or something, I started looking online for Bible studies, online Bible studies I could do with another church, just so I could be a part of something that I wasn't leading. And I looked at this one church website, and under their tab for Bible studies on their page, I went to that, and it said, if you want to join a Zoom group, go here. If you want to lead a group, go here for all of the materials on how to lead it. And that just caused me to pause for a second, because I thought, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that in the Salvation Army, where on their website, without our systems of checks and balances and who's good enough to lead this Bible study and making sure the corps officer signs off on everything, where we would just say, or you could lead your own Bible study and here's all the stuff, right? And I thought, man, how different would our movement be if we just fully released people to do the things that they were created to do in the body of Christ? But I think so often, whether it's all of it being the burden on the officer as the officer is doing, or the people's doing, just knowing that we're all in this together, and we could exponentially move our communities toward Jesus. We could really, and I'm an idealist, but I genuinely believe we could win the world for Christ if we all decided we were going to talk to someone about Jesus. But that means you'd have to live like you believe in Jesus. You know what I mean? That means that you have to, we all have to watch what we say, right? And sometimes I jokingly call it a negatron spirit, when you're around somebody and they're just like grumps or like backbitey or complaining, or we wear our exhaustion like the best badge of honor we have to offer. That has to go. You can't have both, right? You can't have the negatron spirit and sharing Jesus with passion. People won't believe you. But I think knowing as the body of Christ, we all have enough to bring to the table to share with Jesus. Even if you're not trained, even if you've not gone to seminary, even if you're new in the faith, there's a part for you to play in God's economy. And maybe that's just talking to your neighbor when you see each other by the mailboxes and saying, hey, I'm really glad to see you. I've been praying for you. You doing okay? That's it, right? You don't have to actually pray the prayer of salvation with every person you meet every time you see them, but just letting people know that you care about their soul and that you care about them in a really intentional way is really a beautiful thing. And you'll never be ill-equipped if you do it with the heart that's just lit on fire for Jesus.
So good. We are nearing the end of our time of this interview, Lisa. And so I am going to ask you your last question, but give us your best 2-minute answer, okay?
Okay, sorry. You give me preaching, I don't know what to do.
That's good. Needham encourages us to give your witness. So building on this idea of sharing Jesus that you just talked about, he says, give your witness. But he says, we can't give our witness by just disengaging from the world and turning our backs on those that God has called us to bless. We have to give our witness by being a blessing and by sharing Christian compassion, by offering hope to others. How can we do a better job of giving our witness in the world?
Yeah, I think I think about Acts 1:8, where it talks about the Holy Spirit is going to come and you're going to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. So when I think about being witnesses, you can't not think about that. And if you look geographically at a map, that literally looks like a bullseye, right? Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth. So I think Jesus says first Jerusalem, which is where you are, which is in your home, which is with your families, your parents, your children, your people in close proximity. Just start where you are and just take every thought captive for Christ. So when you go into relationships, instead of having your own self-talk that you have going on, as you interact with people, think through the lens of Jesus, through the posture of Jesus, which is so bathed in kindness, which is so bathed in being a listener and a learner and someone who loves for real without expectation or agenda. Just start where you are. And I think we get so caught up in the busy that we forget just to be, right? Just to be with Jesus, just to be with each other, to genuinely listen, not with the intent to form my next response, but really listen to understand. I think that's great. So you just start where you're at, start with who is within your immediate sphere of influence. That's your Jerusalem. And then your Judea is just slightly further out. Maybe it's your neighbors down the block. Maybe it's parents of your kids' school, not too far removed, but slightly more difficult, right? Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria. Samaria was where it was really hard, where it was maybe people are hostile to the gospel, or maybe you have more to lose. I think all of our Samaria will look different based on who we are. For me, when I'm around a bunch of like very strange, tattooed, mohawked, heavily weird looking people, that's not my Samaria. That's where I feel comfortable. That's where I feel like I'm at home and I'm with my people. For you, that might feel like your Samaria, and that's okay, right? So wherever is your Samaria, go there. Go where it's hard and where it's challenging. And then it says to the ends of the earth. And that could be a geographical reference, like big, go far for Jesus. Or it might just be like, who knows, like a metaphorical, who knows what God's going to do with what you can do for the kingdom and for the gospel. But dream God-sized dreams about what this looks like and fully embrace the character of Jesus, which is not frantic, which is not rushed, which is not judgy, which is not easily offended. Just there to be present and to listen and to love and be open, be an open conduit for God to speak through you, because he will. I really believe he will. Everyone's got to start somewhere. I say, don't be afraid. If I could offer you one piece of wisdom that's been true in my life for living missionally and sharing Jesus, it's do not be afraid. Don't be afraid, because God's already won. And so often what we are afraid of are super non-issues. We are afraid of rejection. We are afraid of being alienated. Maybe we're afraid of threats of violence, to that extent. But I think a lot of times those are just non-issues. Most of the time, if we present a gospel or an invitation, the worst that will happen is the person will say, oh, no, thanks. I think we can all risk that for the opportunity to potentially lead someone to Jesus.
We want to thank Captain Lisa Barnes for her time and sharing with us tonight, and for sharing a little bit about her story and the things that are most passionate to her. And we thank all of you for attending again this evening.
Floyd and I just want to take this opportunity to once again just say thank you for joining us once again, not only tonight, but over the last 11 weeks as we have journeyed together in mission towards this new chapter in this territory in the Salvation Army. And as already alluded to, we want to say a huge thank you to Captain Lisa. We've crossed paths many times in Australia, and so it is so good to see you once again tonight, Lisa. And thank you for your words tonight. They were both encouraging and challenging.
Thank
you. Well, I don't know about you, but I can't believe that we have one more week left of sharing together in this way. But I hope your hearts have been stirred over these last 11 weeks. And I pray that you have been inspired by mission and will continue to be inspired as we share next week. Floyd and I will share with help from our host, Erica and Sheldon, as we wrap up this series next week together. But before I sign off, I want to leave you with a reminder from chapter 11 from the book, that when mission gets tough and we feel weak, that is when Christ does his best work. Jesus teaches that when our holy love for others and our faithfulness to kingdom values puts us in such seemingly weak positions, the outcome is redemptive. His own life is the proof. It is only because he loved us so deeply, even to the extent of refusing to defend his own life, that he freed the human race to want to actually live out God's good purposes. So as we leave tonight, remember, in mission, we go out, and we not go out in our own strength, but we go out in God's strength. Let's just pray together. So Father, you call each one of us disciples of you, soldiers of your army, people who are committed wholeheartedly to your mission. And Jesus, help us to be obedient servants to that which you call us to. And so once again tonight, we offer ourselves to the leading of your Holy Spirit. And Jesus, give us clarity once again as we seek to follow you, as you continue to work not only in our lives, but through our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Join Territorial Leaders Commissioners Floyd and Tracy Tidd for the final week of Together in Mission, December 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific. For Week 12, hosts Erica Azak and Captain Sheldon Bungay speak with special guests Commissioners Floyd and Tracy Tidd, concluding our online journey by challenging us to grow like a movement, followed by breakout group conversations. Thank you for participating and helping us shape the Salvation Army of the future.